Good afternoon, everybody. I want to thank you for joining me outside of our Rockland County office building in New City, and hello to all of you who are listening and watching it on Facebook Live. I'd like to welcome everyone to this 2021 Rockland County Budget Address. Standing with me today are Commissioner of Finance Stephen DeGroat and Budget Director Stephen Grogan, who I want to thank for their tireless work. There he is. Tireless work on this budget. It has not been easy. I want to give a shout out to our Commissioner of Personnel, Laura Grubel, who worked very diligently alongside finance to deal with the personnel impact of the 2021 budget, which I will get into that in a moment. We also have our county attorney here, Tom Humbach, my members of my executive staff, including my deputy county executive behind me, my chief of staff, Mike Hovland, Stephen Powers, and Tom Humbach, my attorney, and also the minority leader of the legislature, Lon Hofstein, the deputy minority leader, Vince Tyre, and legislator John McGowan from Orangetown. Again, I want to thank also all the commissioners and department heads who worked so hard starting this summer to get this budget done. Their hard work and insight and creativity has been critical to meet the challenges we faced, and they have been significant challenges. As required by the county charter, we will be submitting the 2021 spending plan today to the legislature a little later on. I want to give those folks out there some context of what the budget's about, because budget information can be very dry. But let me draw a parallel to the average person. You have a home, you're doing fairly well, wife, a couple of kids, husband, and things are good. You have some money in the bank, you have a decent salary, and your world is in pretty good shape. Then something catastrophic happens, and you lose all your money in your bank account, every penny. Now you have no cushion to fall back on in case something should occur. But you step back and say, you know something, I'll be okay. I have my job, we're good. We'll build up that cash in our bank account again, and we'll move forward from here. Then you get a call from your boss. You just took a 20% pay cut. Now what? One thing that has not changed is your mortgage, your taxes, your grocery bill, your heat, your air conditioning, all of those things, insurance, car payments. Those things do not change. You still have to make it work. And this is exactly what we are facing here in Rockland County in layman's terms. We have had some difficult budgets since I took office, but this year was like nothing I had ever experienced. In many ways, this is worse than the 2008 budget that we had at the outset of the Great Recession. Since March, with the onset of the pandemic, it had been common knowledge that we, like all counties here in New York State, are facing a fiscal tsunami from reduced sales tax, reduced state aid revenue, as well as increased expenditures in fighting the pandemic. This situation is exactly why we have spent the last 6 years working to rebuild our bank account, our positive fund balance, the surplus we have in the general fund. However, because of the revenue shortfalls caused by the pandemic, it is possible that the entire account could be wiped out by the end of this year. At best, we will be taking a massive hit, much like the gentleman and lady and gentleman I just spoke about, the family. This is why we began taking action very early to help mitigate the fiscal impact as a result of the pandemic. I saw a similar situation in 2008 when I was a legislator. I was not going to allow it to happen one more time. We immediately implemented austerity measures by only permitting COVID-related and essential purchasing to take place. We instituted a hiring freeze except for essential personnel and those working directly on COVID response. We immediately applied for FEMA disaster assistance and became one of the first municipalities in the country to have reimbursement portal for COVID-related expenses up and running. And we, in fact, are seeing that money coming in now. Through the end of June, we took a look and said, you know something, we are seeing less revenue coming in, but what are we not spending given the COVID crisis? And we started researching all our budgets in county government. We came up with $8 million in savings. We did a lot of work to claw back money to protect ourselves and protect our treasury. We abolished 18 vacant positions by working with our department heads and commissioners. That saved nearly $1 million. We drastically reduced our 2020 capital borrowing. We are only moving forward projects that are already in progress, that show a positive return on our investment, or those which are critical infrastructure improvements. The political thing to do is to delay your infrastructure investment. I will not, and I've said this before, I will not put this on the backs of our children and grandchildren. We will make the tough decisions to go forward here and now. So we did our homework. We did everything humanly possible to deal with the expense side of the ledger here in county government. But despite all these measures, in mid-July, after seeing the sales tax revenue dropping by 20 and 30%, we came to a tipping point, critical mass. We saw nearly a 50% drop in sales tax receipts, and other revenues will continue to drop like a stone. We're facing a projected total shortfall of $40 to $50 million for 2020 alone. And this is according to the New York State Association of Counties. It's not just me saying this. This is in print and it's documented. They projected Rockland County to be looking at a 2-year, a 2020 and 2021 shortfall range of $58 million to $108 million. That's what we were facing. On top of this shortfall, we got another hit. New York State decided to cut 20% of their funding from their mandated programs on their behalf that we manage. New York State is once again trying to balance their budget shortfalls on the back of local taxpayers. These state aid cuts have affected many of our local vendor contracts. Local agencies which receive pass-through funding from the state are paying the price for the state's failure. And unfortunately, we are not in a fiscal condition where we can make up the shortfall. Seeing this 1-2 punch play out to a head by mid-July, on August 4th, I initiated a meeting with the legislative leadership, bringing a comprehensive fiscal plan and sharing all the steps we had taken to date to address this crisis. This is an unusual, a highly unusual situation. I don't know of any time where a county executive presented the skeletons of a budget proposal in August as opposed to in the fall. I, again, showed everything we had done, and we asked for a couple of simple things. We called on the legislature to authorize the sale of the empty Same building right across the street. This is an eyesore by any measure, and would have provided us some critical revenue and cash during these tough times. The last offer we had for that building was $4.51 million. We don't expect to see that again because of a variety of changes in the market here, which I will not get into, but there is significant money we can get out of that building. As well, I asked the county legislature to begin a multi-step process to temporarily add 0.5% to our local sales tax rate. This would have put us in line with Yonkers. This temporary measure would have added 5 cents to a $10 purchase. Yes, only a nickel. The legislation included a specific end date that could have been adjusted to a lower rate or halted altogether if we had seen changes in our financial projections. I spoke with all 6 of our state legislators explaining the dire need for this approach. All 6 agreed. They've indicated support. One legislator actually spoke to leadership in his particular house. So that process was being looked at because that would require there are 3 separate votes required by their body along with the votes in Albany and the signature of the governor to enact the sales tax change. As I explained, this process would give us an opportunity to adjust the temporary increase to 3/8 or even 1/4% if that's what our projections came out to show. At that time, we suggested the temporary increase only because the other options to close what we had, a $20 million gap in the 2021 budget, despite all the things we had done to save money. The only ways you can get that money was a double-digit property tax increase or roughly 200 layoffs along with significant service reductions from the county. A temporary increase in the sales tax rate, in my view, and also supported by the business community, would have been far better option compared to those unfavorable options I just mentioned, because it would distribute the cost of a far broader base than simply overburdening our homeowners with local business owners with a significant property tax increase. Property tax increases do not go away. The sales tax would have. The temporary sales tax increase would have generated revenue from consumers who live outside of our county. Again, taking the burden solely off the local taxpayers, our residents and our local businesses. An example is that 76% of the shoppers who go to the Palisades Center Mall are from outside Rockland County. And they spend their money there, and in short, what they do is they help provide services here in Rockland using out-of-county money. Most importantly, what I brought up to the legislative leadership, with Democrat and Republican there, was that there was a window of opportunity to do this. Since this was a 3-month process typically, and if I was going to include this money in the 2021 proposed budget, we'd have to do it in such a way that would not be speculative income. We had to be reasonable to believe that we'd be able to get this passed in Albany and enacted here in a short period of time. So when I pointed out to them, it was August 4th, I said, your next meeting is September 1st. You have an entire month to look at this. If you have any questions, any concerns, anything, more information you need, bearing in mind every piece of information we had in hand, including our own projections and NISAC projections and every other information we had, was given to them that evening. It had to be voted on September 1st because the state legislature was coming back into session the following week, as we understood it, and they will be able to take the matter up, get a bill number, and move forward. I closed my presentation by asking them to communicate with me, any questions they had. But I also spoke of the fact this is an opportunity. This is an opportunity for Democrat and Republican to work together and come up with something that's good for the people, and then moving the next step, the legislative and executive branch working together to do the right thing for the people and try to get them through a difficult period of time without hurting them any more than you have to. Quite unlike what you see at the national level. Instead of even exploring these options, my plan was rejected by a purely partisan vote of 9 members of the Democratic majority of the county legislature. It was 9-8. Between our August 4th meeting and our vote on September 1st, not one of these 9 members of the majority called, texted, emailed, any questions, any concerns, any ideas that they could have had. They had the opportunity to take action and instead did nothing. Most of what I heard that evening from the meeting was, we need more information. We're not sure what's going to happen. We need to wait a while. No, you didn't have time to wait a while. This is exactly where the problem lies. When you have to make a decision, you have to make that decision. You just cannot waver around and wonder what's going to happen. That is what we ran into. On top of that, the same building, the resolution was summarily taken off the agenda and not even discussed. The reason? The chairman stated he did not want to rush to judgment. Rush to judgment. Bear in mind that the sale of the same building was first proposed 5 years ago today. It's the anniversary that we put that forward. $4.5 million and $500,000 annually, and counting, lost for taxpayers. Adding the final insult to our taxpayers was the chairman's promise that it will be on a committee agenda in the legislature this week. Guess what? It was not. I do wish to thank the Republican minority legislature for trying to do the right thing for the people of Rockland County. I want to acknowledge the fact that they stood up for taxpayers, and I want people to understand that those 8 legislators, 3 of them here, Legislator Hofstein, Legislator Tyre, Legislator McGowan, stood up for the people of Rockland County to take them out of this mess in the simplest and least painful way possible. But that's what they did, and I want to acknowledge them for that. This fiscal plan would have generated the revenue necessary to avoid any cuts at all in government. And more importantly, the property tax increase would have been 0. No property tax increase if this request was followed. I'll repeat that. My plan would have resulted in a 0% property tax increase. Instead, and quite surprisingly, the chairman of the legislature, in writing, recommended cutting county programs and services for those currently out of work and things that they rely upon. He and the Democratic majority suggested cutting vendor contracts, demanding concessions from our unions, furloughing employees, and even raising property taxes. And unfortunately, due to the partisan inaction of the Democratic majority, we have been forced to enact some of their recommendations in the 2021 proposed budget. But first, I want to share some good news. The 2021 proposed budget does not include any layoffs. And I want to say why. The first thing people will say to me is, just cut. We already have an organization that is extremely lean and efficient. During my time in office, we have trimmed the county workforce by 22%, or about 470 positions, since 2014. This proposed 2021 budget includes 1,703 positions, including vacancies. And we'll get into that in a minute, because that practically places us at about 1,550 positions or employees. We refuse to allow our dedicated employees who work through this deadly pandemic to suffer from the action of the Democratic majority. We would not be where we are today without them, and I want to thank our employees again for everything they have done to help get us through these difficult times. We will also not support the legislative majority's recommendation of cutting vendor contracts, as many of them are valued not-for-profits who are performing specific services as migrated contract agencies. That is an effort that we initiated here 4 or 5 years ago, and now every organization has a contract that they are assigned to departments, and they are measured and monitored to make sure that they do what they have to do. But this saves county taxpayers money. These agencies include Meals on Wheels, People to People, Community Outreach, the Martin Luther King Center, Catholic Charities Community Services, and others. Those are the organizations that were recommended to be looked at for cuts. We're not doing that. And I'll tell you why. One of the main reasons is we have to bear in mind that some of these agencies are looking at a 20% cut from the state. And while we can't afford to make up these cuts, we are not going to pile on, as suggested by the chairman of the legislative majority. We have more respect for these agencies than they do. Thankfully, over the several weeks, we have begun to see increases in both our sales taxes and mortgage tax revenue. These increases have been slight, so our losses are a little bit less, but we still are on the negative side of the equation. This gives us a clearer fiscal picture of these critical revenue streams that we are budgeting for 2021. But that is not to say this budget does not contain pain. However, we must now ask those same employees to once again step up, as the hiring freeze which we implemented will continue for the foreseeable future. The proposed budget contains 154.5 vacant positions, many of which have been budgeted at a salary of only $5 for 2021. That means there will be no hiring done with that budget. These vacant positions are through retirements or by employees leaving government, not by layoffs. We do not know the specifics of how these continued vacancies will affect the departments. The impact will vary and will largely be decided by each individual department head or commissioner, but I will tell you this, they will be significant. We will work to minimize the impact on residents, but it will be most difficult and will result in severely reduced services to those who are in dire need due to the effects of COVID-19 crisis on so many. Sadly, this is another recommendation offered by the legislative majority instead of a minor, temporary sales tax increase and the same building sale. The pain felt by many can be directly attributed to the actions of those 9 legislators in the majority. We are not outright eliminating these positions, as we are hopeful that we will see actual revenues increase beyond what we have budgeted and what the New York State will reverse their extremely detrimental 20% cuts at state aid. We are keeping many of these positions in the proposed budget at the $5 salary, which will give us some flexibility. And should we have the ability to fill them, we can do so rapidly if our financial conditions improve. We will evaluate our needs and revenues after the end of the first quarter of 2021. We will do what we can, but only as we can. I will not spend money we don't have. That's how we got into trouble a few years back, and I will not allow us to return to those doomsday days we had. Unfortunately, and due to the failure of the legislative majority to recognize the impact of their politically based actions, we were also forced to eliminate funding in its proposed budget for contractual reserves for our open union contracts. These funds would have been used to settle outstanding union contracts, of which there will be 6 in 2021. And we have to understand something. We have to settle these contracts. Our workers do deserve a contract, and it should be settled in a timely manner. It's now very difficult to do that. But the difficult decisions we have made in the past, as well in the current year, continue to show results. At the end of August, Moody's Investor Service once again increased our bond rating from an A2 to an A1. This is a long way from the near junk bond status that we had in 2014 when I came into office. Every one of these upgrades means money. It means we get better rates while borrowing money for critical infrastructure and improvement projects, and that saves taxpayers money, because every dollar spent by government is spent from the taxpayer's pocket. But to receive this type of news during our financially devastating pandemic is incredible, and it speaks to the work we have done over the past 6 years to right Rockland's fiscal ship. We believe we're the only municipality in the state of New York to receive an upgrade this year. Moody's clearly approves of the proactive steps my administration has taken to limit the fiscal damage caused by COVID-19, and it shows that we must continue down that path. I truly wish the Democratic majority in the legislature would give us some credit in this administration for the work we have done over the last 6.5 years to make things better here in Rockland County. They also wrote, Moody's did, that the biggest issues facing the county in 2021 are sales tax and state aid revenue, but concluded by saying this, and I quote, "Given the renewed focus on conservatism in budgeting, we expect management will be willing to make the difficult decisions necessary to put together a balanced budget. You could rest assured that we are doing exactly that with this fiscally sound budget, which conservatively estimates our revenue. We will continue to fight to protect your money, because at the end of the day, we are stewards of your money. This proposed $721.7 million budget matches the state property tax cap and calls for a 2.84% property tax increase. On average, this increase is just less than $34 yearly for property tax owners, for the average property tax owners. And the fiscal plan, and again, the fiscal plan that I revealed to the legislature early would have contained a 0% property tax increase. The legislative majority also recommended and then took action to ensure that you would get hit with a property tax increase. Don't forget that. I want to again thank and acknowledge the legislative minority for their help on previous budgets and holding the line against speculative revenue and questionable practices that created the $138 million deficit that we faced when I took office. It was their votes in support of my efforts that made that happen. That is the way collaborative government can work. We will continue to do everything possible to protect residents and the county. Your physical and financial health are my top priorities, and I can assure you that the hardworking and dedicated employees within county government absolutely feel the same way. I want to thank you, and I will be free to take any questions on the proposed budget if you have some.
I do have two that were texted in.
Okay.
One, is there any additional detail you can share about what you mean by reduced services in our departments?
Okay, what I would say is this. The plan of action will be laid out by our department heads and commissioners. But I will say this, the number of people that we will be operating with, and again, like I said earlier, we have 470 fewer employees coming into this year, 22% fewer employees. We're a lean organization. When you take 150 more employees out of it, you're going to have damage. We're going to have services compromised. That's just a fact of life. But again, I am not going to spend money we don't have. And again, we had the cooperation of 8 legislators to do something that seemingly made very, very good sense. And most people said, that's common sense. Why would you not do that? To not add a nickel to a $10 purchase, that's assuming it's a 0.5%. Now, let's say our numbers still get better. And during this 3-month process, you know something? We use a 0.25%. A 1% increase. That will be a nickel on a $20 purchase. So, you know, again, I hear the concerns of the person with the question. We don't know. We will do the best we can, but to suspect that, to think that we're going to get through this without any hit on services would be fantasy.
And the other question was, New York State, some other states, the governor has called for federal stimulus funding to help make up their budget shortfalls and for other local governments like counties, etc. Is that something that would, if passed, would impact this budget, or how would it help? Why isn't that something that was considered?
First of all, I think everybody's been paying attention kind of suspects the odds are not good that the federal government's going to give us anything. But here's a couple of facts, and it's interesting you brought that up because the legislative chairman brought this up in his press release. They want to wait until to see what the federal government's going to do. We cannot wait. The budget has to be submitted on October 1st, today, and be voted on in just a little over 2 months. There is no waiting here. You cannot create a budget with make-believe money. Well, hope and change is not going to make them to this budget. So that's speculative revenue. So it's unacceptable. The controller, who's responsible for all of the budgets in the state of New York, would never accept it, and we have to respond to the controller because of the previous situation with our deficit bonds that we're paying down. So no, and also, by the way, the CARES money, you need a 500,000 people population in order to get a penny of it. So even the monies that we're given, we're not seeing. So as much as I would love to wait that long, we don't have the luxury of time. And this is what when I see a legislative leader bring that up as a possible option, That is ridiculous. We don't have the time to wait to see if the federal government's going to give us any money. It's just not reality. We did, and as was brought up by Mr. Grogan, we did ask the legislature for an extension because in October, middle of this month, we get some sales tax receipts in, and we get the reports of how much it is, and it's a better indicator of exactly how we're going to end up to the end of the year, and that was denied.
And any detail you can share on the state cuts? What agencies those go to? Is that something I should provide to this reporter afterwards?
Basically, Robin Mujica, the director of the budget in the state of New York, made it very clear, 20% across the board cuts for all programs. So every department is affected. It could be the health department at a time of pandemic. It could be social services at a time when people have needs. It could be foreign emergency services at a time of crisis. Think about that. Think about the impact of that and why. Look, there was a $6.5 billion budget gap going into the budget season. I, to this day, do not understand where that budget shortfall, how it got fixed. I know what I went through with a $138 million deficit. We had to take active steps, including a deficit bond, to fix it. I heard no such thing, and now the deficit is upwards of $13 to $15 billion right now. But that original $6.5 billion, I don't believe that was ever addressed. So again, here in Rockland County, we put together honest budgets now. I cannot answer for the past. I will not answer for other governments.
And one last question from Steve Lieberman. What's the current county surplus? Last year it was $32 million. This year it ended
It was just under 60, which again, people say, wow, that's fantastic. Well, here's the catch. The catch is under government accounting principles, we were supposed to have between $55 and $60 million for positive fund balance, just in case something happens. Guess what, folks? Something happened. If we had those who know the battles we went through, and again, supported by these gentlemen and their colleagues, remember the battles during the budget season, why I was being more conservative. We were getting a lot of credit for it, getting bond upgrades for it, and I was vetoing the ridiculous spending plans that were being sent back to the majority in the legislature. These gentlemen supported my vetoes. If not for that, we would not have that money in that fund balance. If we did not have that fund balance, we would have gone into deficit. I need not tell you we're going into deficit when you have a deficit bond being paid down does to your credit rating and everything else. We could have been taken over by the state.
That's all I have for questions.
I have one question.
Yes.
You said that in the beginning of next year you're going to reevaluate some of the needs based on kind of what happened. What's like best and worst case scenario?
There's the last part in here.
What's best and worst case scenario when you do that evaluation next year?
Well, we were going through this when we were looking at the revenues, and Mr. Grogan had a very tight eye on what was going on. His projections here locally, based on what he saw, almost mirrored what NISAC was telling us. So he was dead on. So we look at everything we were on a daily basis looking at what was going on. So we're going to do the same thing after the first of the year when we have this budget finalized. We're going to wait till the end of the first quarter, and then from there we'll take a good look at where we stand. What is our fiscal condition? And hopefully it's improving. Hopefully our recovery is better than a slow U curve, and we'll have some extra revenue coming in. We'll be able to fill some positions which should be there. I mean, we are not leaving these positions vacant at $5 because we want to or because we don't need them. What we're doing is we're telling our departments, you need to do a lot more with a lot less. We passed a lot more with a lot less. We've done that already a few times. Now they're going to be functioning in a crisis mode, and it's going to affect people. And this is such an unnecessary hit for the average person in Rockland County to take right now, and it's frustrating for me as a county executive when I make the effort to go and spend time with the leadership of the legislature to get something done that makes sense, to get something done that has the least impact on families and businesses, to have it smacked away from partisan politics. It's really atrocious. It really is. But we'll again do what we can as we can, as I said earlier. And if we see an improving economy, that means we'll be able to get some of these positions filled. Hopefully, we'll not see something get worse. That is the other situation. Again, depending on how bad 2020's hit is on the fund balance right now, our cushion will be much less in 2021. So hopefully things will steady out and start going up in the right direction.